Well, the haters gonna hate, 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 and the fakers gonna fake, 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 baby. I'm just gonna make, making luck, a Dominion podcast. Welcome to Making Luck, a Dominion podcast. My name is Adam, Jake's here, and Wandering Winter's on the call. Hey, what's up?
It's a direction, it's the opposite of down.
Yeah. So we're going to be getting Wandering
parties,
Winter's very colorful and insightful commentary, as we've already seen so far in these first few seconds of the podcast.
This is true. It's like you're getting 1/3 extra podcast.
I don't know that directions
price.
are colors, Adam.
It is the same price.
Yes.
So a few things. First of all,
it costs you 50% more.
Oh, that is true. It's the same price, and it costs 50% more. You're both right.
It's true. Yes.
You're not wrong.
I never am. So last week we tried to do this. We tried to make this episode on Governor that you're about to listen to, and that didn't happen. And I want to say thank you to AT&T for having such terrible internet service that I can't have a fucking audio call and wasting, Jake and Wandering Winter's time.
And now yours, because you're hearing about it. So today we are going to talk a little bit about Governor, which is going to be the card that we're going to cover. And which one did we cover last time? I know that last time we released the Leprechaun minisode.
Oh, yeah. We talked about Colony.
Yeah.
Colonio. And
Yeah,
a little bit about Dominatio.
Dominatio.
Yeah.
So I wanted to address, we recorded this last time, didn't release it. We did have some feedback based on the last episode. We assume a gentleman who goes by the handle AR Flutter had a question about why is it helpful to bigger decks that draw themselves to have colonies when you could just play money and go for provinces, and the game is not necessarily any faster or slower because of the presence of colonies.
The game is necessarily slower, basically. I mean, not necessarily, but basically.
And I mean, his comment also kind of implied, like, why can't you play big money in a way that also just, like, goes for colonies, too? Right?
Yeah, why does that take longer?
Why is that weaker than just doing it with provinces?
Right. You can do that, but it's weaker. So his suggestion was, instead of province, you get platinum. So you spend a few turns doing that, and then you can buy colonies. But the issue is, so you have to look at why you would be playing a money deck to start with. And usually the reason why you'd play a money deck is either because you can't play anything else, in which case, yes, you're still going to play a money deck.
Yeah, sure.
You have no choice. Or the advantage that you're looking for from money is that you're trying to be fast. You're not trying to be powerful in the long run. You're usually trying to be fast.
Yeah, you're front-running.
Yeah, front-running, exactly. And the longer that the game takes, the harder it is for your fast advantage to overcome the alternative players, or the player playing the alternative deck. Their advantage of they're eventually going to be building more.
The other way of putting this is that the game is simply going to take more turns. So any given investment that somebody makes in their deck control or their deck's capabilities has more turns to see itself and pay off. So these things that aren't money, they just give you more value because the game is going to take longer.
I love value. It's so delicious and valuable.
Yeah. Hashtag value.
Yep.
So I want to say thank you for that feedback, because I feel like that was a point that we didn't really specifically address well enough last time.
Kind of implied it and then glossed over it.
Yeah, and now we're doing it. Actually, we've done it. We hashtag did it. It was so great.
Did it. Yep.
And now we're ready to talk about the kingdom.
Yeah.
That we did from last time. Wandering Winter, do you want to read us some cards?
Sure. So the cards in the kingdom from last time were Lighthouse, Warehouse, Armory, Nomad Camp, City, Mint, Goons, Grand Market, Hunting Grounds, and Expand. And of course we had Platinum and Colony. Once again, for our audio-only listeners, that's Lighthouse, Warehouse, Armory, Nomad Camp, City, Mint, Goons, Grand Market, Hunting Grounds, Expand, and of course Platinian Colonum?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Platinian Colonum. Yeah.
That's from the Prosperity expansion.
This Prosperity expansion. Yeah, so earlier when we were looking at this kingdom, I don't think we had any disagreement in terms of what we were going to do. I think that we both agreed that you were going to be going for winning the city split if you can. Basically, your main priority is just to not lose it. But obviously, if you can make your opponent lose it, that's great. But and also, you're gonna try to get a mint to trash those coppers because you pretty much always want to trash coppers in a colony game. And then you are wanting to play some goons and possibly get some grand markets, but maybe not. Expanding things into other things is great, but I think that we all pretty much had a consensus on what you do in this kingdom, and it mostly played to that.
So I think there was
a few little differences. Yeah,
there was some significant differences.
There was a little bit of discussion on the Discord channel, and there was some talk about a couple of other things. Some people said that the presence of colony was not relevant here, that it didn't matter because, the game's going to end on piles and goons is too many points.
I said that I wouldn't be surprised if nobody ever got colony in this game.
Right. Yeah. Of course, that's different than it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Right. And I would say I wasn't wrong all the time. There were games where that didn't happen. There were games where I was right about that. There were also games where I was wrong about that.
Sure.
About nobody getting colony.
I think it all depends on the city split. If the cities are split 5 each, it's really hard to get a lot of goons in play. So the amount of points you're going to get from goons is capped, and colony becomes a much more attractive option for points. If when the cities are gone, other piles are potentially low, and maybe you have some extra hunting grounds in your deck, then maybe the game is over by piles. Yeah. And you empty estates and maybe some other pile that's low, and colonies don't matter in that case.
Yeah, there are 3 separate cards here that make it really easy to empty estates on their own, and they're all here. So
city, grand market, and hunting grounds.
Yeah.
They're the big 3. They always light up in my brain. Hey, watch the estate pile outs.
Oh, 4 things. Sorry, goons is up there too. Goons can pile estates occasionally.
It's not really easy though.
Yeah,
those other 3 are a tier above.
Yeah, this is true. There are a lot of different cards here that are suggesting the game ending on piles, and I think it pretty much always did. I think no.
Kind of.
Sometimes.
I mean, some of the times when I was playing, so I played this some with Adam, but some of the times I was playing with Adam, it, I guess, ended on piles, but colonies were super important to the reason why he could end it on piles. Like, I was playing without platinum, not really going for colony. He was going for a lot of minted platinums and buying a bunch of colonies, and he maybe ended it on piles, but he could have just as easily emptied the colonies. And I was never coming back either way. He basically won by having an insurmountable lead.
This is true, definitely.
Mint was really important for that, and then also Lighthouse. Sometimes he skipped goons altogether, which you wouldn't do if Lighthouse weren't around. Right. You didn't have the great draw, whatever.
Yeah, I was really surprised by how not little the goons' points mattered. They did matter, but the goons' primary role here was the discard attack. Really, the function of goons on this board was to force your opponent to get lighthouses, I'd say. That seems like the reason that you get the goons here is to keep your opponent honest with lighthouse coverage.
You make them get lighthouse, but also the tie-breaking points, the few points was still important. Yeah, and there were some games where I got 2 or 3 goons, and that's still if you have a turn with 3 goons in play, that's as many points as a colony. But what Adam was able to do because of the mint here is he was pretty easily able to get to multi-colony turns in some of the games. So,
well, and if you do ignore the lighthouse and just take the goons attack, it is still pretty easy to draw your deck, but you are not getting as much overdraw, which is important because you have gain and play tricks with both expand and mint. So those extra 2 cards you have to draw, they can really significantly hamper your payload for the turn.
I love cards. So I was going to mention, last time there was a little challenge. This was a designed kingdom, and there was a theme to the kingdom. And one person...
I forgot about this.
Yeah, one person actually correctly guessed the theme of the kingdom. They got so close that,
sure,
gave it to
You're
him.
giving it to him.
Yeah, so every card in this set is a, quote, bigger version of a card from the recommended first game of Dominion. So there's
Nice.
lighthouse instead of moat, warehouse instead of cellar, armory instead of workshop, etc. The only weird one is mint replaced mine because for the walls. And so platinum and colony just being the bigger version of province and gold was a natural fit
I don't
for
know
this.
if lighthouse is that much of a bigger version of moat, but whatever.
Well,
I'll use air quotes. You can't see them. You can't see the webcam. I'm using it. If you're watching, if you're a video listener, they're air quotes. And so this person got the right answer. And
good for you. As promised, you are going to receive Adam's mouse via mail.
No, this was the Chipotle promo code.
Yeah, whatever it is that we're giving you. You are going to
mouse.
get that in the mail.
Right? The little squeaker. I can hear him squeak.
Yeah, right. A live mouse that you will pick up at Chipotle.
You're gonna put some air holes in the box it's in, right?
Yeah.
This went to a really weird place. Did you
yeah,
remember
anyway.
what you were going to say, Wandering Winder?
There are a couple things I wanted to say that wasn't what I was going to say about Lighthouse, but
Okay.
Nomad Camp was actually like a good opener here.
Yeah. And not because you wanted to hit 5 right away.
Anticipating. It was
thought
totally
I thought it
sometimes
was
you
fun.
do that, but then like sometimes I just want to get a warehouse and a lighthouse or something, and that was or 2 lighthouses on turn 2. Like that was also
Double
pretty
house
good.
turn.
So I didn't
Right.
actually love the Nomad Camp. I actually took silver over it.
I mean, lost
I didn't
a lot of
want more
games,
than one.
too.
I didn't though. I didn't like.
The
It's on video.
the other thing
watch the
the other thing I was going to say is that there's a neat trick here that isn't really very relevant, but I thought it was really neat, especially because I never thought of it, even though it's been around since.
If you think it's neat,
Prosperity.
it's relevant.
And that's, I have a bunch of money in play, including some coppers. I can buy a mint and then buy a grand market, even though I played coppers this turn, because they're not in play anymore,
Oh.
because I trashed them when I bought the mint.
Yeah.
That never happened to me, but that is pretty funny.
The
happened
opportunity came up in multiple games when I was playing Adam,
Did you ever do it?
and I don't think I ever took it.
No, you did it once, but you said it wasn't really that great. In one of the games I played against a bot, it felt really good, and I did it.
I mean, it felt great when I did it, but
Yeah.
I don't think it was actually like...
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about maybe a card?
Well, only if we can share the talking about of the card, and maybe some
Yeah.
ways getting a little bit more than others, but
Yeah.
So every time
we
Wandering
all
Winder
participate.
says a thing, I'm going to say part of the thing that he just said. So, Wandering Winder, say something.
Something.
So, and the whole episode is just going to be like that. Anyway,
So we're
the
talking
card is
about
Governor.
Governor
Yeah.
this episode. Governor is a 5-cost action. It's a promotional card, meaning that it's not really part of any expansion, but you can get it by going to some delicious tournaments and,
Yeah.
getting a promo card that way. Shameless plug, by next tournaments in about a month. Check that out, link in the description. Anyway, let's read the text.
Hashtag sponsored?
I wish. So let's read the text of this bad boy. It gives you +1 action, and then you choose one, and then you get the version in parentheses. So the first option is each player gets +1 cards, but you get +3. Or each player gains a silver, but you get a gold. Or each player may trash a card from their hand and gain a card costing exactly 1 more, but yours is 2 more.
Yeah, and just to clarify,
So-
it's not both things are happening. You're just getting the better version of what he just said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too.
We should explain that in English. So +1 action, it's non-terminal. That part's easy.
You always get that.
And then you got to make one of 3. You got to choose one of 3 options. Either you get to draw 3 cards, in which case, if you draw 3 cards, your opponent is going to draw 1 card.
Yeah.
Or you gain a gold, and each opponent gains a silver. Or you get to quote-unquote remodel, although it's not actual remodel because it has to be exactly 2, a card. So you trash a card from your hand, and you gain a card that costs exactly 2 more.
Yes.
And if you do that one, then what your opponent does is they can trash a card from their hand and gain a card that costs exactly 1 more.
Yeah, and Adam told me something about this card I didn't actually know. This card was actually made to celebrate the board game Puerto Rico.
I
which
played
is
a lot of Puerto Rico back in the day.
one of my favorite board games by a lot. And if you know that, it's kind of cute because it's got the Puerto Rico uses the leader-follower system, which is basically what Governor is doing. You do an action, and you do it really well, and then everyone else at the table gets to follow you. But they do it a little bit less good because it's not their turn.
Yeah. I've never played Puerto Rico. I've never been to Puerto Rico. I've never said Puerto Rico, but I have read the rulebook.
Oh, nice.
It's true. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. So Governor is like Puerto Rico, the Dominion card, which is neat.
So there's a lot of things you can do with Governor. There's a lot of words and a lot of options.
Yeah.
And Governor is really, really, really powerful.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about it. I think the abstract, what do you do with just Governor, is maybe worth talking about here.
Definitely. The Governor, like Adam mentioned, is a very, what I would call a centralizing card, in that it's not just that it's powerful in a way that kind of warps the game around it, as in it is the card that is going to do most of the heavy lifting toward you winning the game. The Governor games have these characteristics. They are very fast, and they usually end on provinces, and that's because Governor is very good at emptying them. Now, understand that part of the reason that Governor is fast as well isn't just because Governor is so good at emptying provinces, it's because both players are making progress on each other's turns. So even if somebody wasn't playing a Governor deck, they're going to be faster because they're playing against a Governor deck. So that's worth noting, that the Governor is kind of burning the candle from both ends that way.
Yeah, we should probably explain what a quote-unquote Governor deck is.
Definitely.
And usually I don't like when people talk about, the X deck, like, oh, well, I'm playing the Butcher deck. And I'm like, there's a lot of decks that use Butcher.
Yeah.
What do you mean? But Governor is one of the few cases, maybe along with, like, Minion, where I understand what you mean when you say that, and I actually don't mind calling something, quote, the Governor deck, which isn't to say that you can't use Governor in other decks. We'll get to that later. But the basic game plan of the Governor deck, and why it's so good, as Jake alluded to, at emptying provinces, is that, so your basic game plan is, step 1, get as many Governors as possible. Step 2, gain some golds, or other 6 costs maybe, but golds mostly. And step 3, draw a bunch of cards and then remodel all these 6 costs, these golds, into provinces. Boom, bingo, that's the game plan.
GG
It's
easy.
a gross oversimplification, because there's like a lot more to all of these steps, but that is the bare bones skeleton of, okay, this is the basic idea of how quote-unquote the Governor deck works.
This is true, and definitely as well true that is the miles up, simple Cliff Notes version of the Governor game, and also that's way oversimplified. Governor is a high execution card, and I think that we have all seen a lot of room for improvement in the ways that we've seen our opponents play it.
It's hard, man.
Governor's
hard.
Or in the ways that we've seen ourselves play it. Cough, cough me. Cough, cough. What?
Oh,
Who said that?
Sure, yeah.
I do that a lot.
We're each other's opponents, so we're certainly not above this.
Yeah. So there's 3 options on this card, and I like to think of the 3 options as kind of like the 3 seashells from Demolition Man, the movie. If you haven't seen that movie, don't bother. It's not good. If you have, maybe you just got the funny toilet joke that I just made. But I think we're sort of served by talking about what each of these options can do for you, sort of independent of the other options, or maybe in the context of the game plan. So, let's talk about the remodeling thing.
Yeah.
I think the remodeling thing, you can decrease the number of cards in your deck using the remodeling thing. That's a thing that can happen, but that's really hard to do.
Yeah, and it probably doesn't happen for you if you are the one playing the Governor.
And especially in a way that's positive. Like, if there's no 7s on the board, you could remodel a Governor into nothing. But that didn't help you.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, that doesn't help you.
Don't do that, please.
There is there's an ebb and flow to Governor games, that you see these different actions having different values and different benefits for you as the game goes on. Remodeling, the remodel effect of the Governor is something that seems like it would be really good early, but it's actually often as good for your opponent when you play the remodel option early as it is for you. Oftentimes it's even better for your opponent because, like we said, they actually are getting to thin cards. You are just turning cards into different cards when you do this.
Right.
So you need to be
Usually.
very cautious when you use the remodel option early. Because the same reason you don't open with a bishop. Yeah, it's just not really profiting you to buy a card to help both you and your opponent like that.
And the main reason here is that copper costs 0, and unless there's Poorhouse around, there's no card that costs 1. So
Right.
they either can upgrade their estate into something useful that costs 3, or upgrade something else in a useful way, which is maybe not as good as what you're doing to upgrade your cards. But very often they can say, okay, well, I'm going to thin a copper out of my deck. Whereas if you're remodeling, it's a lot harder to thin. Like, you could go estate into a cantrip or something, and then you've thinned.
That's kind of an exception. At that point, you'd certainly consider it.
But your opponent still, like, definitely also has the chance to thin, or almost definitely, right?
So, like, this is the best case for Governor as a thinner, right? I can remodel an estate into a $4 cantrip. And still, my opponent's getting the better deal out of this. Because I had to buy my Governor and play my Governor. And, like, that was something I had to do when I could have done something else. And they just sit there, and then, I can magically trash a copper. Yes, please, let me trash my copper.
Right,
Exactly.
like, turning an estate into a cantrip is better than trashing a copper, but you have to realize that it costs them nothing, and it costs you a whole Governor play, and there's other options you could do with that Governor that are very often going to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that means that we do get a lot of value out of this trash remodel effect, but we don't look for that value from trashing or thinning. We don't look at this as a deck control function. We look for value from the gaining from this. Like, we look at the cards that we're gaining out of the remodel effect, and that's where we're getting value out of this.
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, with every one of these options, you want to look for where you're getting the better deal out of this, where the version in parentheses is going to be way better than it is for the opponent. And trash a card, there was no parentheses there. It was the amount of money. So if I'm going to be gaining something really cool, then that's when I'm getting the better deal. I don't want to be trying to thin my deck. I want to be trying to gain a card. So I think the two main cards you want to be gaining with the Governor that are a better deal than what your opponent's getting, card number 1 is Governor.
Yeah.
And card number 2 is
Or
Province.
sometimes the other, like, really great 5s.
Sure.
A 5er, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, you're going to have silvers in your deck, and we'll get to that when we talk about the gold game thing.
Silver's actually a really good card, in case you didn't know.
Yeah, partially because of its ability to be remodeled with the Governor effect, and partially because it's silver.
Because it's silver, yeah. It's a really good card.
Silver's a good card.
Yeah.
So, I think that's... I think we're ready to move on from our little remodel seashell here into the next one.
Yeah, sure. I will just say that later on in the game, this remodel effect definitely gets a lot safer to do. It can be a lot... Because your opponent just isn't getting as much value out of something like thinning.
There's 2 reasons for that, right? 1, the stuff you're gaining is better, like we just talked about. But 2, like you just said, they're getting less value out of thinning, but it's interesting to look at why. And the reason why is there's just fewer shuffles to have to draw the card that they're thinning anyway.
Right.
So the marginal value of thinning, I was only going to have to draw the thing once anyway.
So don't, like, randomly trash all the coppers of your hand from your hand when, like, the game's over. Don't do that. You might want to spend those coppers.
This is very true, definitely. Now, the aspect of the thinning not being as good as the gaining is playing out really at every phase of the game.
Sure. But if I'm playing Governor at the end of the game to remodel a card, I'm doing that to gain really good cards like provinces.
Almost always province at the end.
Yeah. And that comes at the cost of a card in my deck, right? And that's the goal.
Right.
It's really hard for my opponent to get a province from that unless he's got a 7 cost in hand.
Yeah.
Gold is much more common thing to have in my hand in a Governor game.
Now, when you're doing your endgame posturing in a Governor game, you do need to be looking at the different price points of this, because when you are playing your Governors to do that remodeling to score points, if there are 7 costs and 4 costs out there, always remember that your opponent can be gaining things like duchies and governors and possibly even provinces that way. So you definitely need to have a read on what might be in your opponent's deck. On the last, when you are going for the end game, when you're actually ending the game, you need to try to be safe about it. And if you can, try to do the remodeling effect before you've drawn cards and not after, so that your opponent has fewer cards to choose from to trash themselves in game. If you're going to be ending the game.
So yeah, this next seashell, the gaining of the treasure.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of when you want to use this ability, the remodel was something that was a lot better towards the end of the game. Gaining the treasures is something that's a lot better in the early part of the game.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna say it's equally good and safe throughout the whole game, unlike these other ones.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of the most constant of the 3, I think.
Yeah.
But let's talk about why it's good.
Yeah.
You know how we were just talking about how silver's a good card?
Oh yeah, it's so good.
Gold is a really good card.
It's so good.
Yeah, gold is significantly better than silver. It just helps you buy stuff, one thing. 2, it's eventually going to be something that you remodel into province, so that's nice. Yeah, I mean, so you do have to be a little bit concerned because, giving them silver also helps them, especially early on. So it's not just the most amazing thing. Turn 5, ram! I gave you a silver and I got a gold. It's still good.
I jumped you with a silver.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Adam mentioned earlier, you're looking for where you're getting the best deal out of this, and I think that usually you're getting the most benefit over what your opponent is getting with this one for the most part throughout the game, both because the gold is a really good card when you don't have to buy it, and also because it is kind of qualitatively different from the silver later on in that it's a different kind of remodel target. It can turn into provinces. Silvers don't have that option.
Right. Silvers can turn into duchies, but I'm going to tell you, duchy is not nearly as good as province. Especially
in a governor game, because governor, you have to do that on your turn with your governor plays, and it's just not very viable. Now, I will say, this aspect, it is a better deal for you, but the silvers are helping your opponent get more governors in multiple ways. It's improving their money density to help them get more governors, and it's also helping them have those turns where they get 2 governors by remodel silver into governor by governor. So you do need to be aware of that.
I would say this option, the treasure gaining option in governor games is usually my default option. But what I mean by that is not that, it's the best option and I don't even mean it's the option you should take most often. What I mean is if I'm playing a governor deck, and presumably you're also playing a governor deck, it's a governor deck mirror, and barring, a number of other things we're going to talk about later, like discard attacks or whatever, basically I need a specific reason to want to do one of the other options. And if I don't have a specific reason I'm going to gain the gold.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. That sounds like what I would say as well.
That's not to say that it could be that, a lot of the time you do have a specific reason. Like, I'm going to draw cards and so that I can then do the play that Jake was just talking about, remodel silver into governor and then buy another governor. Or I'm going to draw cards so that I can have my big turn where I remodel 3 golds into provinces and buy a province and basically end the game. Or I'm going to remodel because I want to gain a governor and buy a governor, or I want to gain a province or something, right? So there's a lot of reasons why you might have a specific plan of, I have this very specific thing I want to do this turn, and so I'm going to take one of the other options. But without one of those specific reasons where this is my game plan for this turn, and I'm just saying, it's a governor, it's a good card, I'm going to play it, and I'm going to get some good effect. If I'm just trying to look for a generically good effect, then that's usually I'll be taking the gain treasure option.
Yeah, sounds right to me.
Yeah. So we're ready to move on to the next seashell here of drawing cards.
Yeah, this one is kind of the elephant in the room, right? Because it's like, you look at a card that says +3 cards, +1 action, and immediately your eyes kind of go wide.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like Smithy, only better.
It's like a non-terminal. It's like an activated.
It's a Menage a no Dupos.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Menage a no Dupos.
It's like a menagerie that worked. Yeah.
Menage a no Dupos.
This is true.
That's what that's called.
I'm just translating it for our audio-only listeners.
Well, they
Oh,
heard
they
the
know.
Menage
Yeah.
episode.
They know.
Menage a
Okay.
no Dupos.
Yeah.
Because you've listened to every single episode of Making Luck, a Dominion
podcast.
Right? Right? And you have your seatbelt on right anyway, so drawing cards.
So this is a risk-reward thing, right? Like, this is like the biggest benefit for you, and also potentially the biggest benefit for your opponent as well.
Let's actually, and let's look at how it works out, because it looks like if you just read the card that it does 3 times as much for you as it does for your opponent.
Oh boy.
That's not correct.
Yeah.
So you're drawing 3 cards, but you played a card. And so if you started with 5 cards in your hand, because it was the start of your turn, you went from 5 cards to 7 cards in hand, right? Your opponent drew 1 card, so they went from 5 cards to 6 cards. So it's like you played 2 labs, they played 1 lab. So you're basically getting twice the effect of your opponent, not 3 times.
So, like,
that's the first
still
thing to know.
good. That's still an advantage that you're getting over them, but it should be. It's a card you're playing that you bought.
You are the governor.
Right,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. It's still a good thing. But, you're getting twice the effect, not thrice the effect. Thrice, great word, underused.
Yeah.
Hashtag
Yeah.
bring back thrice.
Yeah.
So in terms of just what it does for you and ignoring what it gives your opponent, first of all, that's not something you should do. Definitely need to keep a track of what it does for your opponent.
Yeah,
But
totally.
usually, if it was just, there was no downside associated, there was only the thing in parentheses and your opponents didn't get anything, then this would be the strongest option probably, in most cases. Not all cases, but in most cases this is going to be the strongest thing, because non-terminal draw 3 cards is really stinking good.
Yeah.
But the drawback is also really big. So it's definitely interesting to figure out, how good is it for you versus your opponent. There's some things that come up here, and the biggest one is discard attacks, which, again, we're going to talk about a little more later. Discard attacks are really big because if I draw with my governors and then play a militia, or even an urchin, really, then they're going to have to discard down, and, okay, it still helps them to be able to draw more cards first because it's filtering. It's like the difference between a Margrave attack and a militia attack. But it didn't help them that much because they still only get to keep the 3 best cards. And so 3 best out of 6 is better than 3 best out of 5, but it's not that much better. So that's the first big thing. But there's a few other things that can come up. Things like possession. There's some weird edge casey kinds of things.
Oh.
Possession's a big deal. Possession gets really hairy. But the big
Yeah.
other thing that I want to track, and that I want to talk about in terms of mitigating the downside of having your opponent draw extra cards is, if you're going to end the game that turn, your opponent's not going to get another turn because they haven't bought. They're not going to get another turn, and you're going to end the game. And it really didn't matter very much that you drew them a bunch of cards. Now there's some, if you're ending the game by remodeling, then you drew them extra cards, and so maybe they can remodel a 4 into a duchy, so it matters a little bit. It does matter a little bit, but not very much, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, there are some situations where you are going to draw liberally with your governors, and darned be the consequences, and you just described 2 of them, which are the presence of these discard attacks that you have, or you're about to end the game. There's a third one, which is that you are your opponent is already drawing his deck, and he's overdrawing it to the point that he doesn't really get advantage by this draw. Now, that situation alone doesn't mean that it's okay to draw with your governors willy-nilly. What would mean that is if your opponent was drawing that with not governors. If your opponent is not necessarily using his governors for draw anyway, then you're fine to draw with your governors. Basically, any time that you play a governor for draw, there is the risk that it frees your opponent to play their governor for not draw. which then means that you didn't draw that card. And you can get into this feedback loop where you're constantly playing for draw and your opponent's constantly not playing for draw because you're letting them draw cards and they're not letting you draw cards. So you need to be aware of that dynamic.
Right.
That's a big deal. That's how you can easily lose a Governor game, by getting addicted to drawing cards with Governor, like especially in the middle of the game. So now you're just drawing both of the decks, and they're doing all of the cool things.
This is true.
That's a really great way to lose Governor games. Try not to do that.
Remember how I said at the beginning that the Governor games are very fast, but that's not just because Governor is really good at emptying provinces. That's because Governor burns the candle from both ends. That decks playing against a Governor deck are also sped up. So you need to be aware of that, and a big part of that is the draw.
We've talked about these and when they're good and when you're getting a better deal. And so I think that shines some light on a lot of synergies that Governor has, the other types of support that you can look for and really get the most value out of in terms of enabling this, quote, Governor deck we've talked about. So the first thing is, there was the first phase of the game where you want to gain a lot of Governors. So obviously things that can gain Governors are really good. I think the top of the pile here is cards like Altar and Artisan and Border Village.
Kind of University too, yeah.
Yeah, but those three that I mentioned, they cost 6, and so they're also nice to have around for later Governor food. So that's one nice little synergy.
We can talk about University. I don't think University is typically all that good in Governor games, but that's a hot take maybe.
Ooh, hashtag
basically,
hot take.
I guess I should explain why I think that is, and that's because University is often kind of slow.
Yeah.
Because you have to get a potion, and then you have to buy the University, and then you have to gain stuff, and that's kind of a slow process. And, as you are fond of saying, Jake, Governor games are fast because you're burning the candle at both ends. I feel like there's some kind of a Elton John...
Candle in the Wind.
Candle in the Wind reference there.
Don't get this reference, but I believe you.
Yeah. I grew up listening to Elton John, so, I'm with you. Don't worry.
Okay. Hashtag I'm with you.
So anyway, that's one sort of class of synergies is gaining Governors. But I think the more enlightening part is we talked about how Governor really isn't good for thinning your deck. And I think that stands to show you that one of the strongest, well, probably the strongest synergy, the strongest type of support that Governor could be looking for is other ways to thin your deck. This will free you up to not have to draw so many cards with your Governors because there's less coppers and stupid crap to draw, but rather you're not having to use Governor to thin your deck so you can focus more on the gainy bits. You're not having to use Governor to draw your deck because you've trashed all of the bad cards, but rather you can use this treasure gaining option which thin decks really, really enjoy because they love to be able to just trash all the bad cards and then, happily, all of a sudden I have these golds in my deck that are super easy to draw. And so that leads right into the other type of synergy I think is best with Governor is other forms of draw. Because now, if I don't have to spend my Governors to draw cards, I get to spend my Governors to do the other cool things.
Yeah, anything that helps you get your Governors and your golds in your hand more often. And those are going to be having a bunch of Governors, thinning cards, and drawing cards. And those are the big three.
I can see where this is going, right? I'm sorry, wait. I can see where this is going, Billy Bob.
Oh, God.
You were talking about extra trashing and extra draw. Well, if there's a gold gainer on the board, boy howdy, that synergizes with Governor too.
So Adam said some stuff, and he...
You weren't supposed to reveal that my real name is Billy Bob. I'm so upset.
I'll edit that out. Don't worry about it.
So Adam talked about another gold gainer being good with Governor, and he said it in his voice that...
What in tarnation?
Sarcastic. So maybe he'll elaborate on that.
Well, the thing is, Governor was kind of already pretty good at gaining golds.
Yeah.
And that's because it doesn't take one of your actions to do. And a lot of the other gold gainers in the game are terminal. Yeah. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but most of them require you to spend an action, which means if I want to gain a gold and then, do more things, well, that's hard to do without a village, and now I'm getting a village, and that might be a lot of work when Governor's already really good at this. So gold gain, sure, it can be nice, because maybe I don't want to play my Governors for gold gain, or maybe Maybe I trashed all my coppers with a mint because I drew cards with Governor, and hey, now I have this mint. Sure, I will gain golds with the mint. Twist my arm, it's fine.
Or maybe have a
it's just not
maybe
nearly
have a
as
leprechaun.
sexy as Chapel. Ooh,
like
leopard.
our mini-sode from last week.
Hey, Leppy.
And you can gain a gold and a wish with it. Wishes are really good. They let you gain more glods or more governors. And so like maybe you do that, but it's not that much value over Governor was already gaining you the gold anyway.
So yeah, like this is good, but I guess the whole point I was trying to make with a lot of these synergies, the way that they come together is the fact that like Governor does a lot of different things. It's a versatile card, which makes it really good to get a lot of, right? And that's why part of why it's so powerful. But the point is, we wanted to get value out of our plays of Governor. We wanted to get more of an advantage out of our plays of Governor than our opponents. And so when we're looking for types of support, we're looking for the types of support that make up for the bad deals of Governor. So we don't have to do those so we can get the better deals out of Governor.
Yeah.
That's why trashing was the best, and that's why draw was the next best, and that's why gold gaining is less strong support for Governor. That's why how it all comes together.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, and this is sort of a tangential point, a lot of when you're building a Governor deck and you're thinking about how to support it, a lot of it seems to revolve around how can I play my Governors to draw cards as little as possible. Like, that seems to be a big part of, like, what you're... That's not saying that if you play your Governors to draw, you're failing. You're just saying that when you're identifying this good support, when you're identifying is your Governor deck doing what it should be doing, operating at peak efficiency, banging on all cylinders, you are really looking at, like, can I find ways to get the effect of having drawn with my Governors without actually doing it?
The other big thing, though, is the way that the Governor games actually play out, buying Province is still good.
Yeah.
Buying Governor is still, like, buying cards is still good.
I love buying cards.
The golds you're gaining, that makes your deck really good at buying the province.
Yeah.
And being able to have this non-terminal gold gainer means you can sort of quote-unquote flood with gold, which means that you can keep the provinces in your deck and your deck is still viable. So, like, if you commit to getting most of your provinces by remodeling golds like this,
Shame
and your
on you.
opponent goes for this sort of blended approach of remodeling golds tactically when it suits him, and then for the most part just buying provinces, you are going to get outpaced by several turns.
The other thing about how the games play out is there is a time where this shifts, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you get towards the end of the game. At some point, one or the other of you is probably going to, especially if you're both playing this way, one or the other of you is probably going to say, okay, well, at some point, this big turn is going to happen where I'm going to play 4 Governors and I'm going to, like, you know, draw with 3 Governors and then I'm going to hopefully remodel 2 golds in a province and buy a 3rd province, and then that's going to be the end of the game. And because there just isn't enough stuff left in the supply for you to be able to do, either because the game is over or because you're super far behind and you have no efficient way of scoring anymore because there aren't enough provinces left.
Right.
You know, I had this big turn, and so basically I win without as big of a penalty from having drawn you cards. And so you're kind of jockeying for position to know, you know, is it time for me to do this or is it not? And you have to know a little bit, what does my deck look like? What does their deck look like? You know, how many Governors have they played this shuffle? How many Governors have I played this shuffle? How many Governors do we each have left? How many golds are left in our deck, right? Because in order to do this, you're going to need to draw multiple Governors together with golds and probably also still be able to buy a province. And so that's kind of tricky to do, especially if you've been playing in this way where you're not drawing them cards all the time.
Yeah, if you are going for it, quote-unquote, this turn that Wandering Winder describes, and you assume that you're going to end the game, because of the things that you've had to do, if you don't follow through on that and actually end the game, you could have likely just punted and given your opponent the win. Because you've drawn them a bunch of cards like that.
And so the tricky thing is knowing when to time this, because if you go for it and you don't make it, then they can probably go for it on the next turn and very likely make it.
Finish what you
Unless
started.
you've somehow really tracked their deck and know they've already played all of their Governors this shuffle or something like that.
And there's a lot you have to track to the Governor game. like to understand, to be able to make an educated decision like what he's describing. There's a lot you have to keep in mind.
Or sometimes I'll do it where I'm like, well, they and playing intelligently, they only have 1 gold in their deck. I know they can't have this huge turn. They'd have to overdraw their deck by a lot, and they're not in a position to do that. Earlier in the game, it's really important to track your own deck, and it's not quite as important to track your opponent's deck. Like, it still helps, obviously, it always does. But to know, for instance, because like way back we were talking about having a plan, and that plan might be a reason why you don't gain gold. So like one of those plans might be, I am going to, like Jake was talking about earlier, I'm going to remodel a silver into a governor, and then I'm going to still buy a governor. If you're tracking your deck, you have a better chance of knowing, you have a better knowledge of knowing how likely that is and whether it's actually worth going for or not.
Yeah.
So tracking your deck is important at all points, but especially towards the end, tracking both decks becomes quite important to know as you're jockeying for position, when do I go for the big turn and when do I not?
I'm going to say usually my advice is going to be to green earlier and do a little play as if you're going to be doing that tug of war scoring, but then look for opportunities at the start of your turn. Say, like, okay, given what I know about my deck, could I end it? And if the answer is probably not, then you just, play as normal. But, like, you green a little bit to try to get to this point where you have green sufficiently, but then you're looking for these end game opportunities as your turns go on.
I just want to mention one last thing about this, because it came up in my mind when you said you want to green earlier. That's specifically talking about buying green cards.
Yeah.
Much more specifically than like just remodeling too early, because that's something else. That's something else that I see.
You have to have the gold to spend it in order to buy.
Makes your deck a lot worse.
not only in this end of the game for getting green cards, but also sometimes earlier in the game. Similarly, not with green cards, and so it's not greening, but it's a similar phenomenon. If I remodel, let's say I have 8 money in hand, and I remodel, or let's say I have 9 money in hand, right? I remodel gold into province, now I have 6, and I buy a gold. Like, okay.
Woo!
You did
What's better than that is to play
Just
governor to gain a gold and then buy the province. So the difference as it ends up is your opponent gets 1 more silver, you have an extra gold in your deck, and your opponent hasn't been able to trash. So it's just much better. Something else I see early on in the game people will do is they'll remodel silver into governor and they'll feel so great about themselves, but it stops them from being able to buy a governor, and then they end up having to buy like a 3 or a 4, and it's like, you could have just bought the governor and then you wouldn't have given your opponent the remodel. You could have done something else with your governor.
You're just
in a better position basically all around. So
I'm going to second
be
what
careful
you just
about
said,
that
happens a lot, and it's really funny because it's terrible. Like, you should have just bought... That's the thing with these governor games, is these cards that you want, governors and provinces and what have you, you can buy them. You have permission to buy them.
You should buy them.
The game didn't just change around... Just because you can remodel into them doesn't mean that that's your only option now. And then that the option of buying these cards has been shut off to you. In fact, it's a lot easier and less beneficial to your opponent for you to be buying them for reasons Wandering Winder just described. You should be doing that a lot, especially the provinces, I'd say.
Okay, so now we want to talk about some other things that can interact with Governor. We're going to start with other sources of victory points besides provinces. And the thing to note here is that most of these don't matter that much.
Yeah.
In particular, more in Governor games than in other games. And why is that? Well, it's because gotta go fast. Governor games are super fast. They can pile out provinces really easy, which means there isn't that much time for smaller VP cards to accumulate very much.
Right.
So that's the big general overview point about other VP. And that's not to say that other VP isn't important at all, but it tends to be less important unless the game is somehow super, super close. Obviously, there's the possibility sometimes for bigger VP than province to overshadow the governor deck game plan, where you're getting a lot of provinces. But depending on what that is, that might also be too slow, even if it would eventually be worth more points.
Yeah. In particular, we can think about colonies in governor games, and that gets really interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this is the biggest one that kind of deviates from what I was just saying, in that in governor games, colony is often a reason why you don't go for just the straight governor game plan, and you might want to do something else that, if colonies weren't around, might not be as great, because you can remodel platinum into a colony, but it's a lot harder to get platinum in the first place.
The governors
So
aren't gaining the
it's a lot
platinum
harder
for you.
to institute a similar game plan with the governors that you going for colonies than you otherwise would. However, having said that, it is sometimes possible to still just plow on for provinces. Provinces still end the game, and depending on what your opponent is doing and what you're doing and what the strengths of the other things are, sometimes you maybe buy a colony or two, but mostly go for provinces. Sometimes you just straight up go for provinces because you can end the game, but you really need to be keen on ending the game. Whereas in the other thing, like, let's say I got to where I have 6 provinces, I drew a bunch of cards and gained 3 or 4 provinces on my turn, and now I have 6 and you can't catch up. You don't want to do that if there's colonies around, because your opponent's going to be like, thank you very much, I'm going to gain 3 colonies this turn.
That's very true. I mean, like you said, unless you are actually ending the game, you're following through on that threat. The interaction between governor and colony sets up that situation we see occasionally where the colonies are more points, but they end up being fewer of your points at the end of the game, just because you have this other card that's so efficient at emptying provinces. Provinces is just the easier pile to empty, and it's even more so in the presence of governor, which seems to be like laser focused on destroying provinces. So the colonies are certainly important to understand and to play around, but the bulk of your VP a lot of the time is still going to come from provinces. So obviously, if the game goes on, that's not going to be true. Because if you and your opponent are tiptoeing around each other to keep the game from ending out of your favor, that dynamic may break down. But in general,
one thing I do want to note is that in comparison to other colony games, when governor's around, it's a lot better to buy province than it normally would be, because you can empty the provinces like this. So in particular, if you hit exactly 8, like reasonably early in the game, most of the time in a colony game, you're just like super sad. But in a governor game with colonies, you're like, all right, well, I'll just buy province and it's fine. Yeah. But usually if there's 0 or 1 colony is gone, then it's pretty bad to buy province because you're hurting your deck so much, and your opponent's going to outscore you. But in a governor game, like, there's a pretty good chance that the provinces are going to empty, so it's much more acceptable.
Yeah, definitely.
Apart from colony, we could talk about duchy. Yeah, so
governor's sadder to gain duchies than it is to gain provinces.
If your opponent has gone off with some big turn, sometimes you need to like remodel a bunch of silvers into duchies.
Or hopefully more profitably for you, you've had 4 costs in your hands that you've been able to remodel into duchies. But that's assuming more of your draws.
I mean, if it gets it to your turn, then that's not going to be an option anymore.
Right.
Yeah. But it's like you can do that, but you're usually pretty sad too, because it's really hard to gain a lot of duchies.
Yeah.
Like, in comparison to how easy it is to gain a lot of provinces, it's not really easier to gain a lot of duchies, and they're worth a lot less points. So you need a lot more of them if you've lost the province split.
It's not harder to gain duchies. It's just that it's as easy as it is to gain provinces, and the provinces are more points. Yeah.
Exactly. It's usually it's easier to gain duchies, but in most games, but with governors.
Yeah, governor's so good at gaining provinces, it's just as easy to do that.
Roughly equally easy. And you do have to worry about and this comes up in both directions. You have to worry about upgrading a 4 into a duchy. So if you're going for a big turn where you're going to end the game, but you're just like barely going to squeak out a win, you have to think, can my opponent actually upgrade their 4s into duchies? I actually played a game yesterday where I did not think through that well enough, and I thought, but my opponent could upgrade a 4 into a duchy. I better not go for it here. When in reality, he'd played both of his 4s the previous turn, so I knew he didn't have it in hand because he hadn't triggered a shuffle. So like I should have known I was safe there.
Yeah, there's a lot you got to track in Governor Endgame. Like
you got to track, and I didn't track, and I lost, which was fantastic.
Yeah. Governor gives you a lot of different ways to lose. You gotta admire Governor's generosity. It really sets out a buffet of possible failures for you.
But
there's
sometimes
so many different ways you can screw up.
Sometimes, and this is something that's kind of generally true of endgames, sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and say, well, I kind of need to go for it anyway, and if they've got their 4 in hand, I'm just going to lose.
If what I'm afraid of happening is true, I lose either way. So as I've heard you say in the past, I'm going to play to win now as opposed to like playing to like lose later.
Yeah. Duchy is always available and is like that. But there's a lot of other cards that behave mostly similar. Silk Road, Gardens, Fiat, Island, Cemetery.
We got all the 4 costs
earlier.
Yeah,
but
I think that you can kind of just go by the same thing you go by with the conventional wisdom when colonies are around. You just ignore them, and it's fine.
Well, it matters because like you can remodel silvers into them on the last turn of the game.
Yeah, so you can have them and remodel them like any other 4 cost into a duchy. But they're much more likely to have silver in hand in most Governor games than they are to have a 4 cost in hand. Yeah. So you can usually be pretty sure that they're going to have the option to upgrade a silver into one of these if you're trying to end the game. So that's just, it's not that much different, but it's something to keep aware of in that case. Tunnel, farmland, and fairgrounds is kind of similar to Duchy. Like they can upgrade an estate into a tunnel, I guess. They're likely to have a governor that they can upgrade into a farmland or a fairgrounds in a lot of Governor games in their hand. They're really not going to want to do that unless like the game is actually ending right then. But keep in mind it's something they can do.
It's usually a plea of desperation if they do that.
The last kind of alt VP that I think is worth mentioning a lot, or very much, is VP chips, which come from a lot of places. And what I have in the notes here about VP chips is forget about it.
It depends, though, on a lot.
It definitely does depend on a lot. Because the next thing I have is, unless it's Goons. Goons is still good.
Okay, Goons, but also Bishop. Because it's a governor, it's a gold gainer.
Or Dominate, or Triumph. And you need a lot of them, right? You just need a big number of VP.
Dominate, I think, is the most interesting one. And here's where it's most different to Colony. In fact, Governor, I think, is one of the cards that makes it most different to Colony, right? Yeah. And it's because Dominate still goes after the province pile, and like we've been talking about all episode long, Governor really goes after the province pile. Yeah. So usually in a Governor game with Dominate, based on my expansive experience of one game that I've played where both of these happened, when I wrote this outline, I will have you know, when I outlined this, I hadn't played any, but I took one for the team and played some Dominion this weekend.
Whoa.
And got one of these games in.
Gross.
Basically, it's kind of tricky because like Dominate's a ton of points and you still want to be able to do it, but you're running the provinces out and like the provinces are probably still going to run out. So I think you don't go too far out of your way to get Dominates, but you still probably try to buy one or so, maybe two.
The thing about that is that normally Dominate is such a no-brainer to go for just because it is so many points more than Province. The thing about is that a lot of the time, if you have done that with Governors, you have probably conceded a couple of provinces to your opponent in the process because you've
Right.
had to draw, right? Like that's the big thing with Dominate is you need to have an increased hand size. So
Unless your opponent
there's-
has drawn for you.
right, yeah. So you've either given your opponent an easier Dominate, or you have given your opponent a couple of provinces and emptied one yourself. So Dominate is a lot of points, but it's a risk to take them.
Well, remember the comparison we made last episode. Like, 2 dominates is the same as 5 provinces. So, a governor deck, it's not crazy for them to get 6 provinces before you can get 2 dominates. So
This is true.
That's
Yeah,
the calculation.
right. The difference is that when we said that earlier in that episode, it was kind of being said like, this is what you're up against and this is why you don't do it. Whereas we come back to that with the governor game and we're like, okay, this is again what you're up against and it might actually happen.
The last thing I want to talk about is deck control. So we talked about thinning being great. Deck control is like one of the best things for governor, but it also goes the other way. Junking attacks make it a lot harder for this quote-unquote governor deck to work. So if there's Witch or Mountebank or Cultist or something on the board, you definitely want to do that maybe not instead of governor, but
First.
at least before governor.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Is like, that doesn't mean you don't get the governors eventually. It just means that you have this other objective that needs to get out of the way before that.
And
which is
in
to
that
have the chunk
situation,
clear.
in that situation, you can go for governor after, but you might not. You really have to look at the board more.
Sure.
Because unless there's really good thinning to overcome the junk that's in your deck, it's going to be harder to make the governor deck game plan of like eventually being able to remodel golds actually happen very well. But playing it for gaining golds and just buying provinces is an option. But if that's all you're doing, then there may be other options that are equally good or better. So watch out for junking attacks. But even in those decks, it's like there's very few, if any, decks where I'm adding a governor. If I add a governor to my deck, I'm not happy. I'm usually happy. It's just a question of occasionally there's something I want even more.
Yeah.
Sweet. So we have a kingdom that we can talk about. It's got governor in it, and we could read the cards in that kingdom.
Yeah.
How about that?
I was going to have Parker do it.
All right, Parker. Okay, so he doesn't know how to speak yet.
Is that your
so
Parker voice?
on his behalf, I will read the cards.
Yeah.
We have Overlord, Transmute, Settlers, Alchemist, Chariot Race, Masquerade, Mill, Priest, Governor, Mint, and then there's Tomb. Yeah, good times. One more time for our audio-only listeners. Overlord, Transmute, Settlers, Alchemist, Chariot Race, Masquerade, Mill, Priest, Governor, Mint, and there's Tomb.
Oh,
So
man.
the thing that jumps out to me here is that Transmute both combos with Tomb and Mill.
Yeah.
There we
Seems
go.
really good. So I think you got to win the Transmute split.
Yeah, you gotta be able. Wait, so that gains you a gold, which is great with Governor. And, no, okay, so here's like my really big question here, and I haven't even started thinking about what my game plan is, but I'm trying to figure out my open because there's so many really, really good options for that. Part of me wanted to say you open Overlord Masquerade, no question, but then I was like, Priest. So I don't know.
So I think I want to open with Priest, and if I have
Mint open,
3/4, I probably open Silver Priest, and if I have 4/3, I probably want to open maybe Priest Silver anyway, maybe Priest Overlord.
I kind of think I think Priest Overlord sounds the most appetizing of those.
I definitely want an Overlord on turn 2. How many coppers I have on turn 1 will dictate the other card I get. Masquerade is probably fine if I have 3. Priest is probably great if I have 4. If I have 5, I'm probably getting a Mint. That sounds amazing to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was kind of joking about the Mint opening at first, but then I thought about it. I'm like, that's actually
There's-
real decent.
There's Priest.
There's gold gain with Governor.
There's
to
Govy,
get
like,
your
I'm-
econ back up.
I'm very happy to open with Mint Overlord if I manage to get a 5.
If I have a 2/5, I'm probably opening Settlers Mint and then getting an Overlord on turn 2-3 and being kind of sad about it.
I'm definitely sadder on a 2-5 than I think any of the other options. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Do I get the mint still?
I think you probably do. What's your other option? You get a governor, maybe?
The other option is Overlord turn 1, which just seems like the worst thing ever.
Or Overlord
There's no
Yeah,
plus buy here,
bad.
right?
Yeah, so everything's governor. The only way to get more than one province a turn is governor.
Yeah, I mean there are ways to do more than that with points. Like you could be doing stuff with Tomb and Chariot Race to be gaining points even if you don't have extra gains for cards.
Yeah, but like governor still trashes cards too.
This is true.
Also, you can
but it trashes for your opponent as well. So you're not.
You've gained like 12 treasures from you and your opponent, then you draw your deck and you buy a mint and you score 12 points, and it's amazing.
And if you have a priest in play, you get $24 and you don't have any more buys.
That's why I was asking about the buys, because that would.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that would be pretty sweet. But like obviously you want other sources of thinning besides governor. But I think then you're playing a governor deck because
you're here,
yeah. Well,
I'm actually going to go out.
That.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think I'm going to skip Overlord here, at least on a 3-4.
So I was thinking about that too. Not because like I really want the Overlord. I am leaning toward getting it anyway. But you can justify skipping the Overlord just because there are really good options for 3 and 4.
I really don't think you can. I think unless you have a 2-5, anything other than Overlord on turn 2 is a huge mistake. And if you have a 2-5, I don't know, maybe mint into Overlord is okay. That's still doesn't sit right with me. I'm not sure what.
I mean, you could also Overlord turn 1 on a 2-5, and that might be better.
I thought about that, and it felt really bad, too. I don't know what I would do in that
I'm going to lean toward what Adam's saying.
Better than Settlers Overlord.
Yeah, right. I'm going to lean toward what Adam's saying and say you get the Overlord. I'm not as strongly committed to it as he is just because there are so many good options for 3 and 4.
It's okay, Parker. I'll make sure they know that Overlord is great.
I'm with you that Overlord is great. I'm
not with you.
My only concern is that there are other things that are great too, and not having the debt is the opportunity that I'm taking over having the Overlord. Man, I am still leaning toward the Overlord personally.
My biggest questions are about Masquerade. Well, kind of Masquerade and Priest. Do I want both? Do I want neither? Do I want? Well, I definitely don't want neither.
Yeah.
Unless I get an Overlord, maybe. But and then I think that Alchemist is going to be too slow. Transmute was a joke, and Chariot Race is the big question for me because you're probably both going to have a lot of expensive cards. There is a little bit of a weird interaction thing where if you play a Chariot Race and then you see there's a bad card on your top of your opponent's deck, it might be a little bit safer to draw with Governor.
Yeah, but what if Chariot Race is doing for you?
Usually scoring points.
Tiebreaker points. I mean, if I'm going to gain a 3 cost, and I'm going to get the Chariot Race.
You're going to, okay, so I'm going to buy a Chariot Race.
Mint... I legitimately think that you have to watch out for mint being tiebreaker points.
Yeah, I was gonna say there seem to be better tiebreaker points from Priest, Masquerade, and Tomb, and also just I don't think the tiebreaker points are as good as just playing to win the game faster.
Well, yeah, getting 5 provinces seems great because I'm going to trash cards on my way there.
But I also agree with what you're saying, which is that if you're buying a 3 and if you hit 4, you buy probably either Mill or Priest, but if you hit 3, it's probably Chariot Race seems better to me than the Silver. So yeah, I might end up with some Chariot Races in my deck.
I just want to say I think that maybe at some point Chariot Race is better than Silver. I'm not sure, but I think that this is maybe one of those boards where when you're thinking about a big turn, you kind of do need to make sure that you actually end the game.
Yeah.
Because of Mint Tomb, because if you don't end the game, then your opponent has their big hand and they go, I'm going to draw with 3 or 4 governors, remodel a gold into a province, and then I have a huge number of treasures in my hand. I'm going to buy a mint and score 12 more points.
That is
I-
true,
so,
but
like,
that makes your deck a lot worse.
I don't like that at all because like
I like it
if
as
you
a-
do that, then
No.
what are you doing to my deck? You're drawing me a bunch of cards, giving me
No,
a bunch
no,
of
no, no, no,
silvers,
no, no,
and
no,
I
no,
just
no,
get my
no, no,
own
no.
mint.
You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm saying if you leave me with one province left, at the start of my turn, there's one province left because you got a bunch of provinces but didn't end the game. Then I'm going to draw a bunch of cards, remodel into the last province, and buy a big mint.
Okay.
That
Yes.
seems like something that may happen. It's not something I'm gonna play around.
I don't
That
think
no,
that's
I
gonna
think
happen.
that's
Like,
I think that's important. I think that's important if and it's why you need to end the game on your big turn as opposed to
Sure.
having a big turn where I now have like a 5-2 province lead. You got to watch out for that more.
I'm really skeptical of that.
I am reserving judgment. I haven't thought about it enough.
I think if you're in a position where that's a significant number of points, you have to be so far behind on provinces that you like it couldn't possibly. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't. It just
Well,
seems really unlikely to
What
me.
he's saying is not that like you plan to like get this mint and like that was your idea. It was just that like if you end up in the situation where like a
Yeah,
lot of the
I just-
time where you
I don't see
play
it happening.
a lot of the time where you play the governor game, you are either winning the game on your turn or you're effectively winning by like getting enough provinces that they can't catch up. So the
Exactly.
mint does give you this escape hatch to catch up, if your opponent doesn't actually make good on their threat and end the game, and that's not trivial. That may come up, not never. I don't see it coming up very often, personally. We'll see if it comes up in our test games. But
I really don't think it's going to come up, and I think it's because
I think
the number of treasures you have in your deck is going to be the same as your opponent. It's going to be 7 plus the number of governors played for gold gain by either side. And so, like, if I'm gaining provinces with these, the treasures are in the trash. Like, I got the tomb points for it. How are you going to get so many more tomb points than me because you gained them
Silvers.
on that turn,
Silvers.
and then I couldn't trash them? Like,
Silvers.
how many more silvers, though? Like, I can mint those too, and I probably did, because that's good to do anyway.
5 or 6.
yeah.
Okay.
So all this is saying is, I think the significance of any of this is just that you fire later, right? You fire with your governors, not when you think you might have a chance to win the game. You fire when you have a plan to win the game. Yes, it's happening.
I'm skeptical. There we go. Let's see how it plays out. And let us know what you think. If you're still with us after this epic podcast, leave us a comment in the comments section. Or you can head on over to adamhorton.com. There's a million links. You can go to our Discord channel, forums, contact information for all of us. You can hit us up and let us know what you think. And tell us how wrong we are. In particular, how wrong Adam Horton is. Yeah?
Leave
Or
a comment on this web zone.
On the web zone, yeah. I think he might be asleep.
Yeah, he looks asleep.
Is he asleep?
Yeah.
Sweet. So Parker's asleep.
Nice. You got to watch it happen.
Leave a comment in the comments section. Tell us what you think of that.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is it's now time to give a big whoop because the podcast is over.
That seems to be the case. Unless you all had anything more to... Oh, next episode is going to be episode 55.
Nice.
And there's going to be something special. We got to figure out what that is. We have some ideas.
Yeah. Oh,
if you have any ideas, let us know.
I almost forgot to mention the most important thing about Governor...
Yeah.
My geometry teacher in high school called them Yates.
Oh, called what Yates?
Because notes. They're not notes. They're Yates. Was a great teacher, honestly.
Welcome to Making Luck, a Dominion podcast. My name is Adam.